So, I've been smoking some pot, but I never smoked when I played or coached, so it's new to me. You're probably wondering who just dropped that incredibly candid and, let's be honest, pretty hilarious post retirement confession. It was a gentleman heading into a Golden State Warriors game back in 2019, casually chatting about farming his own medicinal marijuana out in Maui. But look, this isn't an explainer about agriculture in Hawaii. It's about an incredibly unconventional thinker. 1,335. I want you to lock that massive number in your head for a second. Because that same quirky retiree tending to his plants in Hawaii, he's actually the man who racked up exactly 1,335 regular season victories on the hardwood. It sets up this fascinating contrast, right? How does a laid-back, totally outside-the-box thinker become the second winningest head coach in the entire history of the NBA? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring the Innovator's Playbook, why 1,335 wins redefined coaching. We are going to unpack the central mystery of Don Nelson. Here is a guy who played 14 seasons and won 5 rings as a player with the Celtics, yet he never won a single NBA championship as a head coach. And somehow, despite missing out on that coaching ring, he literally laid the groundwork for the modern basketball era as we know it today. All right, let's get right into section 1. The mad scientist inventing Nellie Ball. To really understand his impact, we have to look at his wild 31-season coaching career. Nelson spent time at the helm of the Bucks, Knicks, Mavericks, and Warriors, bagging 3 NBA Coach of the Year awards along the way. But he wasn't just managing egos or calling standard plays. He was a brilliant tactician who essentially put the old rulebook in a shredder. Over the years, people started calling him a mad scientist. His signature style was famously dubbed Nellie Ball. It was this hyper-unconventional, fast-paced offensive system that prioritized space, three-point shooting, and positionless basketball. At a time when everyone else believed you literally couldn't win without a massive traditional center under the basket, Nelson was perfectly fine sacrificing height. He wanted pace and space to create constant, dizzying mismatches all over the floor. So how did this actually look in practice? Well, you've definitely heard the term point forward, right? It's that tactic where a small forward directs the offense instead of a traditional point guard. Well, Nelson pioneered that very concept with the Milwaukee Bucks in the 1980s. Instead of a smaller guard, he just handed the keys to his 6'5" small forward, Paul Pressey, and let him run the offense. That completely freed Nelson up to put elite shooting guards on the floor at the same time without sweating over who was handling the rock. To really appreciate this, you got to picture the stark contrast of that era. If you look back at the 80s and 90s, traditional NBA basketball was super rigid. It was slow. It was totally dominated by giant men just bruising each other in the paint. But Don Nelson, he was operating with a futuristic vision. In his half-court sets, he'd purposely put a center who wasn't much of an offensive threat right out at midcourt. Why on earth would you do that? Because it forced the opposing team's massive shot-blocking center to step all the way away from the basket just to cover him, which completely opened up the lane for Nelson's faster guys to attack. This tactical genius hit overdrive in the early 90s with the Golden State Warriors during the legendary Run TMC era. We're talking Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Mullin. Nelson threw out this wild lineup of 3 guards and 2 forwards, no true center whatsoever. And it worked. It sparked a massive 23-game turnaround from the year before and basically popularized the thrilling run-and-gun offense. This explosive small ball lineup just left those traditional slow-footed defenses completely stunned. Moving right along to part 2, the talent whisperer, unleashing unique players. Now, X's and O's are great, but they're really only half the story. Nelson's system required a massive amount of belief in deeply unconventional players. To make Nellie Ball hum, he had to give his guys the ultimate freedom to just play their game even when the rest of the league thought they were nuts. Take a young 7-foot German rookie named Dirk Nowitzki. When Dirk was struggling on defense early on, Nelson didn't bench him. Instead, during a game, he specifically assigned Dirk to guard Muggsy Bogues, a 5'3" point guard, for a few possessions. Nelson's actual instructions? Just stand there in the paint and wave at him. He doesn't want to shoot. It's just a perfect, hilarious example of his quirky approach to building up a player's confidence. So the huge takeaway here is that Nelson saw things others just flat out didn't. He gave Dirk Nowitzki the ultimate green light. Nelson was literally the first coach in basketball history to let a 7-footer actively shoot from three-point range. He'd seen Dirk practice over in Germany and told his front office, this kid has a chance to revolutionize the game. By empowering Nelson like that, Nelson shattered the traditional mold of a power forward and forever changed how big men play the sport today. And man, that eye for talent created a ripple effect that basically birthed the next generation of superstars. Let's look at the timeline. In '98, he drafts Dirk Nowitzki to the Mavs. Fast forward to 2004, he desperately tries to offer a max contract to keep Steve Nash. He got overruled by ownership, and Nash, of course, went on to win 2 MVPs somewhere else. Then, in 2009, back with the Warriors, he drafts a skinny, undersized guard named Stephen Curry. His unwavering belief in these unique, non-traditional skill sets literally laid the foundation for the NBA we watch every single night. Which brings us to Section 3, the ultimate validation, the We Believe miracle. All of this, the tactical innovations, the psychological warfare, it reaches an absolute boiling point in the 2007 playoffs. 67. That is how many games the first-seeded Dallas Mavericks won during that regular season. They were an unstoppable juggernaut. And what's absolutely fascinating is that Nelson himself had built that exact Dallas team from the ground up, molding them into contenders before stepping down in 2005. But here we are in 2007, and Nelson is now coaching the 8th-seeded Golden State Warriors, staring down the barrel of the very monster he created. The anatomy of this upset is just incredible. Because he built them, Nelson knew the Mavericks' entire playbook inside and out. He knew that Dallas, now under Avery Johnson, relied heavily on finesse and stubbornly refused to play Dirk at center. So what does Nelson do? He weaponizes his extreme small ball, fast-paced system to completely abuse their lack of speed. And just like that, the 8th-seeded Warriors dismantled the first-seeded Mavs in one of the greatest, most shocking playoff upsets in sports history. Let's wrap things up with Part 4, Maui, Marijuana, and Legacy. After his coaching career officially wrapped up in 2010, Nelson proved he was still the ultimate outside-the-box thinker, even off the court. Which actually brings us full circle to where we started. Remember that quote from the top? Living his best life in Hawaii, Nelson developed his own personal medicinal marijuana stash, which he fondly dubbed Nellie Kush. And of course, he had a deeply methodical, quirky process for it. Water the plants daily, play music for them, bless them. He joked that you really have to treat them like a baby. It's just this wonderful, very human glimpse into the relaxed mind of a basketball genius at rest. But underneath that relaxed vibe, there's a really quiet, relentless persistence to him, too. In 2012, at 72 years old, Don Nelson officially graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in physical education. He had originally left college 50 years earlier, just a few credits shy of finishing. When he looked into finally getting his diploma, the university decided that, hey, a lifetime of teaching at the highest level of the NBA more than covered his final student teaching credits. Pretty cool, right? So let's bring it all together. Why exactly did those 1,335 wins redefine coaching? Because he is quite literally the architect of the modern NBA. He sits second all-time in career wins. He straight up invented the point forward. He introduced the hack-a-shack defense in Dallas, intentionally fouling poor free throw shooters to game the math. And he pioneered the pace and space small ball that literally every single team uses today. The fact that he never snagged a championship ring as a head coach, honestly, it's completely irrelevant when you look at the massive stylistic blueprint he gifted the league. I want to leave you with this one provocative thought. The very next time you sit down to watch a game, the next time you see a 7-footer casually drain a step-back three, or watch a lineup without a true center run a fast break off a beautifully spread floor, I want you to ask yourself, how many of today's standard basketball strategies would even exist without Don Nelson's 1,335-win trial run? His invisible hand guides every single game you watch today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep an eye out for the innovators who aren't afraid to rewrite the rules.